Hello, dear friends and dear guests. Welcome to an online webinar and digital photo exhibition celebrating the life of Mahatma Gandhi. My name is Petros Petrikos, a PhD student and research associate and administrative officer at the University of Nicosia. It is with great pleasure and utmost privilege to act as today's coordinator for this interesting and highly insightful webinar commemorating 150 years since the birth of Mahatma Gandhi and the International Day of Nonviolence. With us, we have Her Excellency, Ms. Madhumita Hazarika Bhagat, High Commissioner of India, as well as honorable members of the High Commission of India in Nicosia. We also have the University of Nicosia's Senior Vice Rector, Professor Konstantinos Ferlas. Welcome everyone, many thanks for honoring us with your presence today, Madam High Commissioner, dear Professor, dear honorable guests. Now, the structure of this webinar is as follows. We will first present the Gandhi Katha by Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, a renowned Gandhian scholar, and this is a video kindly shared with us by the High Commission of India and Nicosia. Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, who was born and brought up in Mahatma Gandhi's ashram in Sevagram near Wardha in Maharashtra, has cultivated strong ideological connection with Mahatma Gandhi's ideals since childhood and has spent the past 2 decades exploring ways in which Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy and teachings can be spread to other people in India and abroad by giving lectures, workshops, and delivering the Gandhi Katha. Katha is an Indian oral tradition by which knowledge and tradition is passed down to generations. It is extremely popular in religious storytelling and other performances and ritual events in Hinduism. And following the video, as part of our program for today, we will proceed with a discussion, first with Professor Konstantinos Ferlas, our Senior Vice Rector's remarks, then followed by Her Excellency, Madam High Commissioner of India and Nicosia. And finally, we will be presenting the digital exhibition on Mahatma Gandhi. Now, without further ado, let us enjoy the Gandhi Katha by Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna.
Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. I express gratitude to the High Commissioner HE, Srimati Madhumita Hazarika Bhagatji, and the High Commission of India and Cyprus for hosting the Gandhi Katha today amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, nonviolence, and purity of means, his spirituality, his environmental credo, and his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence, and in India, we celebrate Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary as Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respect to the leading lights of Cyprus and convey my warm wishes to all the people and people of Indian community members who have joined me online today. Cyprus and India have traditionally enjoyed excellent relations. Over the decades, the relationship has grown stronger, including in the economic and trade arena. Through the years, Indian and the people of Cyprus have both suffered from a turbulent history of colonialism, struggling for freedom and independence. In an address on the occasion of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, during the tribute at the bust of Gandhiji, the House of Representative Siluris said, and I quote, The agonies and parallel fate of Cyprus and India shaped their strong and friendly ties that we share to this day. These ties are founded on mutual respect and commitment to democratic ideals and values, as well as on our common aim to work for peace and prosperity for our citizens. I am confident that we shall continue to nurture these ties and further enhance our cooperation in a multitude of fields, keeping always in line with Mahatma Gandhi's inspirational legacy. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narrations. I have given talks on Gandhi Katha in 94 countries during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji in the past 2 years. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have taken inspiration by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about the greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many leaders across the globe. Mahatma Gandhi used to start and end his days with prayers. In the ashram, every activity and program used to begin and end with prayers, and these prayers were from all the religions of the world. Sarva Dharma Prarthana. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection. The devotional poetry of the same poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of the life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and must have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural backgrounds from around the world, and he actively encouraged friendship across religions. One of Mahatma Gandhi's legacies to the world is nonviolent conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues for establishing brotherhood, unity, and harmony. Even after 7 decades have passed, after Gandhiji has passed on, in every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his visions and actions are of an enduring significance for all times and places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, personal, and public life. Gandhiji stands out as the champion not only of political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy in today's world. Gandhiji believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, nonviolence, purity of means, love, self control, forgiveness, respect, friendliness, compassion, mercy, and so on. For Gandhiji, the principle of satyagraha or non-violent resistance and civil disobedience was by non-cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, soul force, suffering, and self-sacrifice. For him, the consideration for the sufferings of his fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His beliefs and actions were firmly rooted in the fact that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by non-violent means. His legacy of satyagraha is widely recognized the world over and seen in many moments for civil rights even till today. Mahatma Gandhi's environmental practices were based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. Gandhiji had warned about the unsustainability on the global scale a century ago, as he declared that the earth has enough for man's needs, but not for man's greed. Equality for women within the society was a principle that Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants, and he may well have kept in mind the very basic unit of human organization, a village or a county. His vision of Gram Swaraj, which is self reliant, independent, self governed village built on the premises of sustainable growth, is the need of the hour. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, revolutionary thoughts, actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all the parts of the globe at all times and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards and find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. And this he did by repeated questioning. And that question was Ko Aham, who am I? What am I? And what is the real purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. The answer came to Gandhiji that the purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Gandhiji. He said, Truth is God. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person is capable of truth, of being good and doing good to others. The second realization was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. Because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, and respect to everyone. That was one of his traits. He respected individuals as individuals, and that is another trait that we see in Gandhiji. Romeo Rolla, the French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, had written Gandhiji's biography in 1924, which introduced him to the world. And when he met him in 1931, he said, and I quote, This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action, and he follows a straight line, but he never stops. I will play the Gandhi Katha hymn or dhun in Hindi that elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as having harmony between thoughts, words, and deeds.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तुझो मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तुझो जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तुझो जीवन में मंगल सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा। मनमाने कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मनमाने कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल। जीवन में मंगल के द्वार भी तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार भी तू खोल। ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान। सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा।
Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy was primarily truth centered. Truth was the first and foremost principle in Gandhian philosophy. Gandhiji's life was a continuous series of experiments with truth, and that is the name of his autobiography also. It's, the title is My Experiments with Truth. He applied his philosophy to his own life through selfless service and to practical social and political service through his non-violent civil disobedience campaigns, which he termed as Satyagraha. This is his first gift to humanity. To understand Gandhiji's thought and philosophy, one must understand him as a whole and not in parts. His thoughts on religion, education, economics, health, society, politics, literature, and culture, and in many other areas, need to be studied, understood, and adopted according to the context. His life is filled with many kinds of challenges, solutions, and achievements. He used truth as an experiment, not only in politics, but in his personal life too. Another aspect that gave him strength was the clarity that he had acquired from years of experiments and reflection on the philosophical content of Satyagraha. He was clear that Satyagraha was based on the principle of Advaita, of non duality. If the same essence of soul encompasses all human beings, it would allow a Satyagrahi to become one with the oppressor. Any failure to touch and reach out to the opponent would be a failure of Satyagrahi and not a shortcoming of the philosophy of Satyagraha. Moreover, with the experience that he had had over the years, he had begun to see love as a very powerful and positive force. The challenge before him was to use this force with effect. The bigger the challenge, the more enthused Gandhiji was by it. Gandhiji realized that untruth, injustice, oppression, and tyranny last only as long as their victims accept them. The moment one learns to say no to untruth and injustice, their edifice collapses immediately. This was true for the political, the economic, and the social order. Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent past. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, love, forgiveness, compassion, oneness, truth force, love force, and soul force. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change. And he had said, and I quote, I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our times. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non participation in anything you believe in is evil. Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as a society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for all of us. But the effort has to begin from the point where you are standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy, that of course he was very busy. What we mean is the action of putting ideas or beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines as economics, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, politics, and much more. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi has advised to shun these seven social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, my life is my message, and that life is so transparent and open that anyone can learn from him. John Haynes Holmes was a pacifist, anti war activist, and the founder of American Civil Liberties Union. He had met Gandhiji and found Gandhiji's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. I believe that he is unquestionably the greatest man living in the world today, he had said. And he said, when I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ. I will play the Gandhi Katha Dhun in Hindi, the hymn about Gandhi's philosophy of truth, non-violence, purity of means that combined in the form of satyagraha.
लागे लगन लागे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा लागे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा
Time magazine had listed out three most important protests over 190 years. The first one was Boston Tea Party. The second one was Dandi March or Salt Satyagraha. And the third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. There is a common thread of non-violence in all the three. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat for Dandi with 79 fellow marchers, walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles a day, stopped at 48 villages, gave innumerable speeches, and the total distance he covered was 241 miles till he reached Dandi seashore on 5th April. In the early hours of the morning on 6th April, when he picked up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people joined him, and towards the end of the campaign, 300,000 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered the news. William Lawrence Shearer, the American journalist, was present there and gave his graphic reporting of the salt satyagraha and brought the incidents to the notice of the world. So Gandhiji remains the most powerful global brand ambassador of peace and non-violence, a youth icon for resisting injustice, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. In 1904, in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book, Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life and started leading a community life of self control, voluntary poverty, and bread labor. He established four ashrams in his lifetime, two in South Africa, called Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and two ashrams in India, Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat in 1917, and the Sevagram Ashram in Wardha, Maharashtra in 1936. In Sevagram Ashram, Kasturba Gandhi and Mahatma Gandhi lived in poverty like the common villagers of India, and all the ashram community also lived like them. This was his ideal of a non-violent face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary satyagrahis and seekers for offering the highest sacrifice of their lives in the freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor by establishing their self respect and dignity. I am happy to inform you that I was born in his last ashram, the Sevagram Ashram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle and lived in the Sevagram Ashram. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society, and his constructive work was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his spinning, his silence, and his prayers, gave him the internal strength which were as much a part of his politics as of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the inmates of the ashram community that he had founded. The ashram community, through its own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and practices and continues to do so even till today. This shows the relevance of his practices. Gandhiji carried out his experiments in health and wellness through nature cure, diet control, hydrotherapy, sunbath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day. The ashram inmates participated in this willingly. Gandhiji has given three gifts to humanity. The first one is satyagraha, the second one is constructive programs, and the third one is Ekadasha Vrata or the 11 observances, which were a set of rules for the ashram inmates for spiritual progress and voluntary self-control. Ivan Illich, the Croatian-Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram Ashram in 1980 and he stayed there for 1 week. Every day he used to sit in Bapu Kuti, or the cottage where Mahatma Gandhi lived. It was a very simple structure made from locally available material. And Ivan Illich said, and I quote, "This hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness, which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness." Now I will play the Gandhi Katha hymn, which explains Gandhiji's philosophy of truth is God.
आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध। आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल। ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल।
Though Gandhiji's role and contribution to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health and well being. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was also a firm believer of nature cure and conducted experiments related to diet and fasting. He always believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove that very cause rather than falling ill again and again and then attempting to treat it with excessive medication. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Mahatma Gandhi's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was His mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message was simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, reduce the wants, follow the tradition, cultural practices, the values, the environmental credo, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. Gandhiji was very interested in health and wellness and remained ever vigilant about his own health as well as of others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any disease come anywhere near us, and every person is responsible for looking after his or her body, mind, and spirit impeccably. He advised that in order for keeping physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, we should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of the five elements that are found in nature. And that is what has been told by our ancient seers and sages in India. And these five elements are air, water, fire, earth, and space. For the wellness of our bodies, the balance and harmony between all these five elements is necessary. During the COVID 19 pandemic, enveloping ourselves in the rhythms and the forms of nature can be transformative and healing. Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition of India, recommends spending time in nature each day. Doing so allows us to experience the wonderment of this existence with all our senses. Nature allows us to shift our attention beyond the domain of our ego and to recognize that we are all inextricably connected to the universe. From the mind body perspective, Mahatma Gandhi's standpoint was that health is an optimal integration of body, mind, soul, and the environment. Environment is our extended body. Yoga and meditation integrate all components of health, and Gandhiji was a strong believer in nature cure, Ayurveda, and practiced Ashtanga yoga as well. His experiments with nature cure were always on himself. He advised his friends and disciples to follow these remedies and treated and cured 30,000 patients through nature cure. Very few people know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergencies, working as frontline workers and treating patients in the service of humanity. During the Second Anglo-Boer War from 1899 to 1902 and in the Zulu uprising of 1906 in South Africa, He established the Natal Indian Ambulance Corps along with 300 free Indians and 800 Indian indentured labor and served as stretcher bearer. In the bubonic plague outbreak in Johannesburg in 1904, he and Kasturba Gandhi rushed to help the Indian indentured labor, quarantined the patients in an empty godown after thoroughly cleaning and sanitizing it, and treated some of them through nature cure. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi returned to India in 1915, and in 1918, there was an outbreak of Spanish influenza pandemic. So Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center and treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity and maintain physical distancing. Both of them took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, gave them correct information, and helped them in remaining positive through prayers, meditation, chanting of Ramanama, and taking care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. Gandhiji had said on 10th November 1918 that our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past. But today, we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them, even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self restraint and of imposing a limit on our acts, wants, and desires. In August 1942, Gandhi wrote the book titled Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crises globally. First is the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic. The second one is the serious and long drawn financial crisis. And the third one is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Mahatma Gandhi, who had said, "My life is my message." The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, and the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family, as brothers and sisters, whether we choose to see it or not. We only have one home, this planet Earth, our Mother Earth. The current COVID 19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. Our ancient sages and seers from India have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava, or the global citizens, and said that the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Many lessons are very clear, and some are still unknown, surrounding us in uncertainty. This uncertainty is causing mental stress, anxiety, existential crisis, fear of extinction and death, and the mass psychology of living in depression and grief is pointing out towards this fact in the current pandemic. We are collectively grieving for the loss of our known lifestyle. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation, prayers, chanting relieves the stress response. And when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up, the thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times, but a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian Way of Life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces relaxation, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, and remaining positive. So Gandhiji comes out as the greatest healer and the wellness guru who comes free of cost. Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in the times of COVID-19 pandemic. Gandhiji's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, empowerment for self-care and care in the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting the Gandhi Katha. My special thanks to all of you who have joined me online today. I will end with the Sanskrit shloka, which is the peace benediction for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let all be happy, let all be healthy, let all experience auspiciousness, let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light, I will end the Gandhi Katha with the hymn or dhun Shubha Mangala Ho.
मंगल हो शुभ मंगल हो शुभ मंगल 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 हो शुभ मंगल हो शुभ मंगल हो शुभ मंगल मंगल हो
Thank you very much for a very interesting and insightful lecture in Katha. Now, moving on with our schedule, I would like to ask from Professor Ferlas, Senior Vice Rector at the University of Nicosia, to share a few thoughts and remarks with us in celebrating the life of Mahatma Gandhi today.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Madam Ambassador, distinguished guests, dear friends. It is a great pleasure to host such an important event today, particularly in the company of such high-profile speakers as our guests, both virtually in the online domain and physically here at the University of Nicosia. Over the past few months, the University of Nicosia has been working hard in engaging with a wider audience, with both our community in Cyprus as well as abroad, and in partnership with important stakeholders, despite the plethora of challenges presented by the coronavirus pandemic. The Office of the Senior Vice Rector at the University of Nicosia, alongside other key departments of the university, are glad to have been involved successfully in this process. Madam Ambassador, we live in momentous and historically significant times. Although we are celebrating a theme of particular importance behind the screen due to the ongoing dangers of the pandemic, we are still in a privileged and a rather fortunate position to talk about the life and the teachings of an important and inspiring figure. The 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi and the International Day of Nonviolence not only signify the continuation of a timeless legacy of peace, but they also show the growing importance these themes have in international affairs. Dear friends, as Franklin Roosevelt once said, to some generations, much is given. Of other generations, much is expected. This generation has a rendezvous with destiny. Mahatma Gandhi's nonviolent, no-cooperation movement has inspired millions across the globe. It has redefined the way we go on strike or protest for our rights as individuals and as a collective through social movement formation as well as through civil society initiatives. From east to west and north to south, people have engaged in different forms of movement and non-violent protest in order to address issues of transparency and justice today. In India, in 1929, Mahatma Gandhi wrote in a letter to a friend that Thoreau's essay had deeply impressed him, inspired in part by the message he garnered there. Gandhi founded the Indian independence movement, organizing a massive resistance to the British colonial occupation of India. He developed an entire political philosophy, calling it the philosophy of non-violence, to harness the sole power of the Indian people as an instrument of their common good. Gandhi, himself a Hindu, believed in a universal spiritual truth reflected in all the great religious teachings of the world. He wasn't seeking to use spiritual power to achieve a political end. Rather, he exalted a state of spirituality from which political healing naturally results. Today's spiritual renaissance echoes that idea. According to Gandhi, a nation has a soul just as an individual has one, and living the others is the key to the deliverance of both. An early holistic thinker, Gandhi claimed that if a nation's soul is healthy, its politics will be healthy too. Gandhi once said, "Non-violence is the law of our species, as violence is the law of the brood." The spirit lies dormant in the brood, and it knows no law but that of physical mind. The dignity of man required obedience to a higher law, to the strength of the spirit. Non-violence is the first article of my faith. It is also the last article of my creed. Non-violence is a power which can be wielded equally by all children, young men and women, and grown-up people, provided they have a living faith in the God of love and have therefore equal love for all mankind. When non-violence is accepted as the law of life, it must pervade the whole being and not be applied to the isolated acts. The very first step in non-violence is that we cultivate in our daily life, as between ourselves, truthfulness, humility, tolerance, kindness, love, and forgiveness. Dear friends, when we talk, however, about Gandhi's work, we first turn to the concept of ethics and pragmatism. On the one hand, ethical approaches teach us to take a step back and see something without the mask of the stereotype we try to put on their face. It is a process of transformative justice, whereby objectivity and the language of hatred and predisposition against constructed norms are all swept aside as we try to move on further towards the acceptance of others. On the other hand, it is also about empathy and a strategy that achieves real, meaningful political dialogue between two opposing sides. It is spiritual in nature as we go beyond the fictitious anger we allow ourselves to be subjected to. And when we do find resistance, then we fight through non-cooperation. Think of it as sanctions placed on countries when they wrongly cause harm upon others or fail to uphold our own values. It is a way of getting the message heard and spread without the use of force. Gandhi's inner power came from this inner work. When asked by a reporter what his secret was to gain such power over the ruling British Empire, he responded, "I try to make myself zero." He was referring to develop such a selfless love that each thought, word, and deed was motivated for the welfare and well-being of others and not for his own gratification. The ideas, beliefs, and attitudes, dear friends, we have reflect how we are raised in this world, the relationship we now have with ourselves and the people around us. Learning to undo the ego's illusions takes loving patience and determination. It requires a commitment to invite love and forgiveness into our lives in order to see things differently. It requires a responsibility to choose peace instead of war. It requires an understanding to choose light instead of darkness. Gandhi was motivated by love for others, by allowing the light to enter his mind, by practicing forgiveness, and by showing a willingness to go deep and change his way of thinking. Gandhi taught us that each one of us is unique, and the person we are is unlike anyone else on the planet. No one has the exact living experience or set of memories that we have. What we know today is not at all what we are capable of knowing. We are our own storytellers. Therefore, we are free to imagine and experience what it means to be human without wealth and materialistic illusions. Gandhi taught us what it feels like to be human without exerting dominance over others, without reckless arrogance, without fear of others unlike us, without rotating, replicating, and reinventing the negative stereotypes other people try to impose on us. Gandhi showed us that we are not defined by age, gender, religious background, or ethnicity. Instead, Gandhi invited us all to go beyond such factors and experience what we ache for. And if we dare to dream of meeting our heart's longing by disappointing or defying another person in order to be true to ourselves. No other book, I believe, or scripture influenced Gandhi, shaped his character, and transformed his life as profoundly and permanently as did the Bhagavad Gita. Among the many books he read, Gita alone became an unfailing source of strength and solace to him in the darkest hours of his life. As a spiritual reference book, the Gita was not only his constant companion, it was his eternal mother, whom he esteemed even more than his earthly mother. Like a proverbial mother, the Gita provided him not only a conditional love and support, it even lifted up his spirit and led him kindly to light. As once he said, "Lead kindly light," was a Christian hymn he loved very much. It showed him the way from darkness to eternal light, eternal truth, and eternal bliss. In his own words, Gandhi said, I confess to you that when doubts haunt me, when disappointments stare me in the face, and when I see not one ray of light on the horizon, I run to the Bhagavad Gita and find a verse to comfort me, and I immediately begin to smile in the midst of overwhelming sorrow. The Gita also became his practical ethical guide for living. He turned to her for not just strength and solace, but also for a reasoned approach and for practical ethical guidance. In the words of Paramahansa Yogananda, once he said, mankind is engaged in an eternal quest for that something else he hopes will bring him happiness, complete and unending. For those individual souls who have sought and found God, their search is over. He is that something else. And dear friends, I believe that Mahatma Gandhi was that something else. At the core of the discussion today, we see serious problems of sustainability, human rights abuses, corruption, as well as rising stereotypes against selected groups in society. The more we remain silent and choose not to act, the longer these voices remain suppressed. These issues spread out not only within such groups or sections of the population. It is not an exclusive issue that these groups solely bear responsibility in addressing. It is up to each and every one of us to help our fellow human beings voice their concerns, ask questions, directly engage with the decision-making process, and discover new ways in which we can bring forth change. Human beings, from an objective standpoint, are all political and social animals in a way. We set goals and agendas, we pursue our own interests, yet we also desire acceptance, a conversation amongst others, and social interaction to further our knowledge and to grow as individuals as well as a society. What is currently happening around the world demands our attention and insight as academics, researchers, politicians, diplomats, policy makers, or even global citizens. Indeed, it is up to us to pursue positive change and achieve a more peaceful era. Gandhi's teachings teach precisely that. If we advocate change within ourselves first, then our surroundings can also positively change. It is a struggle of conscience, patience, as well as morality. This means that who we are is as important as what we do, that how we go about change determines what ultimately will be changed, and the process itself is as important as the goal. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, the means must be as pure as the end, for in the long run of history, immoral, destructive means cannot bring about moral and constructive ends. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, my life is my message. Madam Ambassador, dear friends, as a professor of medical sociology and senior vice director of the University of Nicosia, as well as through my involvement in various social enterprises and civil society communities and groups, I too acknowledge the important work we have seen expressed through Gandhi's timeless paradigm. Let us all work then towards fulfilling these objectives, and let us all join forces to commemorate and celebrate these important teachings and messages that remind us all that we have the potential of going beyond our mere confines and constructive barriers by advocating peace and justice in the world. We need to declare peace now with as much serious effort and intention as that with which a nation declares war. Fear-based thinking is essentially a war mentality, and who amongst us does not live with fear? Our efforts to be spiritually healed, to find the love that sets us free, is our effort to become not only more peaceful ourselves, but also instruments of peace in a war-torn world. A challenge of our time is to establish, develop an alternative political culture based on the concept of love, which is more than a feeling. It is a choice, a commitment, and stand we take. Otherwise, it is nothing. What the world needs now is a massive change of heart based on the tools of non-violence and the seeds of a brand new world. And I will conclude by quoting Mahatma Gandhi's words when he said, "We but mirror the world. All the tendencies presented in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do." Thank you.
Many thanks, dear Professor, for the wonderful speech. I now call upon Her Excellency Ms. Mahatma Gandhi, High Commissioner of Gandhi Jayanti. You have the floor, Your Excellency, for your speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On the occasion of the grand finale of the 150th birth anniversary celebrations of Mahatma Gandhi, we are very thankful to the University of Nicosia, the rector and the vice rector who is present here, for hosting this webinar, which is so important in terms of the fact that Gandhiji is now very much relevant to the future generation. And it is the universities and the schools which are the forebearers of carrying the message of Gandhiji to the students. I would like to say that the Katha that we presented by Shobhana Radhakrishna has given almost all the aspects of Gandhiji's philosophy, his ideals, and how the relevance of Gandhiji's teaching is even today in these times of pandemic that we are facing worldwide. So I would only like to reiterate, which I feel are some of the most important 7 principles of Gandhiji. And these are wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, business without ethics, science without humanity, religion without sacrifice, and politics without principle. These are the main principles that Gandhiji upheld, and to follow these principles is something that can lead us to the path of enlightenment in a certain way. I think when we talk about his philosophy, when we talk about philosophy of other leaders and spiritual persons, then we are actually thinking of ways when we can reach that stage. I think both India and Cyprus, we are living examples of what Gandhiji had taught and what Gandhiji had led his whole life towards. I recall that when we were young children in school, we were taught a very important principle of Gandhiji. And that was that when somebody slaps you on one cheek, you should give your other cheek instead of, retaliating in terms of revenge. Because he always used to say, an eye for an eye will make the whole world blind. So once again, I would like to say that whatever Shobhanaji has said, whatever Vice Rector you have said also about Mahatma Gandhi is something that of the youth today and all the people today, they even take an iota of this in their practical lives, then it will prove to be a panacea, not only for the whole world or for the society, but for individuals themselves. Mrs. Shobhana Radhakrishnan also, showed us some favorite hymns of Gandhiji.
Wonderful.
And one of the favorite hymns of Gandhiji, which shows how one should be compassionate towards your fellow human beings, was Vaishnav Janto Yine Kahiye Jo Peer Parai Jane. You call a person, a pious person, a worldly person, who realizes and understands the pain of others. So with these words, I would like to conclude, and I would thank you once again and all the viewers out there in the that an opportunity today has been created for putting some practical aspects of Gandhiji's teaching here.
Absolutely.
And we look forward to many such more gatherings again.
And it is an honor, Madam Ambassador. As University of Nicosia, we are eager, willing to collaborate further and establish maybe a series of seminars based on Gandhi's teachings because they are universal. And you cannot fight darkness with darkness. We need love in order to heal the souls of the nation as well as the souls of individuals.
Thank you so much.
It is an honor. It is an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Many thanks, Madam High Commissioner. Thank you so much both for the insightful speeches. Moving on, finally, we are presenting the digital exhibition on the life of Mahatma Gandhi, and we hope that you enjoy this walkthrough of important art contributions. Many thanks for your attention. We hope you enjoyed the lecture and the exhibition, and I wish you well. Thank you so much.